Is it possible that the entirety of recorded human history, every empire, every war, every discovery, is merely the final chapter of a much older, far grander story? And what if the prologue to that story, the history of our world's true beginnings, is not lost to time, but merely frozen? Waiting for us beneath 2 miles of solid ice at the bottom of the world.
Welcome to Secrets of the Ancients, where ancient mysteries awaken.
In an age of satellite surveillance, deep-sea drones, and global connectivity, it has become a common platitude to say that there are no blank spaces left on the map. We have photographed the dark side of the moon and mapped the abyssal plains of the Mariana Trench. We carry in our pockets devices that grant us access to the accumulated knowledge of our civilization. We have, it seems, conquered the unknown. And yet, there remains one glaring exception. A continent twice the size of Australia, larger than Europe, a landmass so alien and hostile that less of its surface has been explored than the surface of Mars. It is a place where the compass spins wildly, where the sun vanishes for 6 months at a time, and where the ice holds 90% of the world's fresh water in a frozen grip. We call it Antarctica. To the modern mind, it is a scientific outpost, a pristine natural laboratory for studying climate change and cosmic rays. But to the historian, the philosopher, the student of ancient mysteries, it is something more. It is a profound and unsettling anomaly. It is the final repository of our deepest cultural myths, of lost worlds, of great floods, of forgotten golden ages, and of cataclysmic pole shifts. For decades, we have been told a simple story, that Antarctica has been a frozen wasteland for millions of years, long before the first flicker of human consciousness. But what if that story is incomplete? What if the ice is not a permanent feature, but a temporary veil? This is not a journey to a geographical location. It is a journey into a possibility space, an exploration of the haunting questions that this continent forces us to confront. We will not merely look at the evidence. We will dissect its meaning. We will examine the strange geological formations, the baffling ancient maps, and the whispers of secret military operations. But more importantly, we will connect these threads to the grand tapestry of human civilization, to the political tensions of our present day, and to the philosophical questions of what it means to be human on a planet whose history may be far stranger than we have ever been taught. We will treat the official narratives and the speculative theories with equal intellectual rigor, for both tell us something crucial about our world. One tells us what we know, and the other tells us what we fear we might discover. Join us as we peel back the layers of ice and time to explore what may be the Earth's most profound and fiercely guarded secret, the Forbidden Continent. To begin to pull at the thread of what Antarctica might be hiding, you don't start with dusty books or classified files. You start with the land itself. You have to look at this continent not as a dead, white slate, but as a living crime scene, a place of profound contradictions where the very stones and ice seem to be telling 2 completely different stories at once. One story is the one we all know. The other is a story that whispers of an impossibly deep past, a history so old it has almost been scoured from existence. The pyramids of ice, a trick of the light, or an echo in the stone. Let's talk about those pyramids. When the satellite images first hit the internet, the world split into 2 camps. On one side, you had the geologists and the professional skeptics. They came forward almost immediately with a clean, tidy explanation that fits perfectly into the world we think we know. The structures, they said, are called nunataks. They're mountain peaks that were tall enough to stick out from the ancient ice sheets as they formed. And over millions of years, the incredible force of the Antarctic winds, combined with a relentless cycle of freezing and thawing, simply carved the rock into these shapes. It's a process of erosion, a coincidence, a trick of light and shadow. They'll point to the Matterhorn in the Alps and say, "See, nature does this." And in a way, they're not wrong. Nature can create breathtaking geometry. But then there's the other camp. The camp of the curious. The camp of those who believe that when something looks too perfect, it's worth a second look. And the Ellsworth Formation isn't just another pointy mountain. The problem isn't that it has a triangular face. Lots of mountains do. The problem is that it appears to have four of them, descending from a distinct apex to a nearly perfect square base, a base now choked by glaciers. It's the sheer architectural intention of the thing that sets off alarm bells in your gut. It's the difference between finding a rock on the beach that vaguely looks like a face and finding one that has two symmetrical eye sockets, a nasal bridge, and a mouth. One is a fluke of erosion. The other is a clue. This is where we have to step out of geology and into philosophy. The easy dismissal is to label it pareidolia, our brain's built-in tendency to see patterns, like the man in the moon or Jesus on a piece of toast. It's a psychological tick, they say, a relic of an ancient survival instinct to spot predators in the grass. But this explanation is a double-edged sword. Yes, our brains are wired to see patterns, but maybe that's because we are, ourselves, a product of a universe that runs on patterns, on mathematics, on geometry. Maybe we're not just projecting patterns. Maybe we're hardwired to recognize them when they appear. What if that instinct isn't being fooled here? What if it's doing exactly what it was designed to do, to recognize the fingerprint of intelligence? Think about what kind of evidence you would even expect to find from a civilization that might have existed, say, 20 million years ago. Not one brick would be left, not a single shard of pottery, not one written word, not a bone. All of it would have been ground to dust by the unimaginable pressure of a 2-mile-thick sheet of ice grinding across the continent for eons. The only thing that could possibly survive such a cataclysm is the most monumental of all creations, architecture that has been carved directly from the bedrock of the planet itself. The evidence wouldn't be buildings placed on the land. The evidence would be the land reshaped. It would be terraforming on a continental scale. And what would that look like after millions of years of weathering? It would look like a mountain. It would look ambiguous. It would look exactly like what we see in the Ellsworth Range, a feature that sits hauntingly on the razor's edge between the natural and the artificial. It's a ghost in the geology, and perhaps we're looking at it all wrong. Our modern minds think in terms of building, of imposing our will on nature. But what if a truly ancient consciousness worked differently? What if they were less conquerors of nature and more collaborators with it? Perhaps they didn't build a pyramid from scratch, but found a mountain that already held a certain power, a certain resonance, and then merely perfected it, sharpening its lines and aligning its faces to the heavens, turning a piece of geology into a piece of sacred geometry, an act of co-creation with the planet itself. That is a form of intelligence we, in our modern hubris, may have forgotten how to even recognize. The once and future garden, a planet's forgotten memory. If the pyramids are the ghost, the fossil record is the body, and it tells an undeniable story. When the first explorers, men like Robert Falcon Scott, were freezing to death in the blizzards of the last frontier, They were stumbling across the evidence of a lost paradise. Imagine their state of mind. Frostbit, starving at the edge of human endurance, and they look down and find a fossilized leaf from a beech tree. It's a message in a bottle from a different world, a world with sunshine and flowing water and gentle breezes. Since then, the discoveries have become a flood. Entire petrified forests have been found, some trees still standing upright as if they were flash frozen in place. We have found fossilized pollen, spores, and the rich, dark soil of ancient riverbeds. The science is settled on this. Antarctica was once a temperate green continent. For 100 million years, it was part of Gondwana, the great southern supercontinent, and it was covered in lush rainforests teeming with life. The scientific establishment has placed a very firm timeline on this. They tell us that the final, irreversible deep freeze began around 15 million years ago. And since our species, Homo sapiens, is only thought to be about 300,000 years old, with complex civilization only emerging in the last 10,000 years, there's no overlap. It's an open and shut case. The green world of Antarctica vanished millions of years before the first spark of human consciousness. But here's where a historian has to step in and say, hold on. The history of archaeology is a history of being wrong. It's a history of tidy timelines being completely blown apart by a single discovery. For decades, we were taught that complex civilization began after the invention of agriculture. First, you get farming, then you get settlements, and only then, much later, do you get monumental architecture and religion. And then, in the 1990s, we unearthed Göbekli Tepe in Turkey. It's a sprawling, sophisticated temple complex with massive, T-shaped pillars covered in intricate carvings of animals. It's at least 11,500 years old. That's 7,000 years older than the pyramids of Giza. And it was built by people who were, supposedly, primitive hunter-gatherers. Göbekli Tepe didn't just push back the timeline. It broke it. It proved that our neat, linear story of progress was wrong. It proved that we fundamentally misunderstand the capabilities of our ancient ancestors. So, when science tells us with such certainty that a civilization couldn't have existed on a temperate Antarctica, we have to take that with a grain of salt. Our understanding of prehistory is a canvas that is constantly being repainted. And who says this forgotten civilization had to be us? The 15 million year timeline for the ice seems long to us, with our fleeting lifespans. But in geological time, it's just a chapter. That green Antarctica existed for tens of millions of years. Is it truly so arrogant to assume that in all that time, on a continent brimming with life and resources, we were the only form of intelligence to ever get a foothold on this planet? It's a profound failure of the imagination. The fossil forests of Antarctica are more than just a scientific curiosity. They are a memento mori for our entire civilization. They are proof that the world we take for granted, our climate, our coastlines, our stable ecosystems, is not guaranteed. It is a temporary gift. They show us that the Earth operates on cycles of creation and destruction that are so vast, they make all of human history look like a flicker in time. An entire world can be born, live, and die, and be completely erased from memory, buried under a tombstone of ice 2 miles thick. This isn't ancient history. This is a prophecy. We now stand on the precipice of our own self-inflicted climate shift. We watch our own glaciers melt and our seas rise. The story of Antarctica's transformation from a green paradise to a frozen wasteland isn't just a story about the past. It's a preview of a potential future. It is the ultimate cautionary tale, a lesson in cosmic humility written in stone and ice. It begs the question, if an entire world could be forgotten, How much of our own history have we already lost? And how much of our future are we willing to risk? Of all the anomalies connected to Antarctica, perhaps none is as intellectually seductive and historically disruptive as a simple piece of gazelle-skin parchment created in 1513. It is the Piri Reis map, discovered in 1929 in the Topkapi Palace in Istanbul. This map, compiled by the Ottoman admiral and cartographer Hasse Ahmed Muhyiddin Piri, or Piri Reis, is a stunningly accurate chart of the coasts of Europe, North Africa, and Brazil. But it is the southern portion of the map that has baffled scholars for nearly a century. It appears to depict a landmass south of South America, in the location of Antarctica. What is astonishing is that it seems to show the coastline without its ice cap. The map depicts the subglacial topography of Queen Maud Land, a landscape hidden under miles of ice that was not mapped by modern science until the advent of seismic echo sounding in 1958. How is this possible? Piri Reis himself provided a clue in his own annotations, stating that he compiled the map from around 20 older source charts, some dating back to the time of Alexander the Great, and others from even more ancient, unknown sources. This mystery was brought to popular attention by the work of Professor Charles Hapgood, a historian at Keene State College. In his 1958 book Earth's Shifting Crust, Hapgood, with the support of Albert Einstein, proposed a radical theory. He argued that the Piri Reis map was evidence of a sophisticated, worldwide maritime civilization that existed in prehistoric times. This lost civilization had mapped the entire globe, including an ice-free Antarctica, thousands of years before the start of our own recorded history. Mainstream academia has largely rejected Hapgood's claims. Skeptics argue that the landmass is not Antarctica at all, but a fanciful or distorted representation of the South American coastline. They claim its resemblance to the subglacial topography is a coincidence, a product of wishful thinking. However, let us analyze this from a historian's perspective on the nature of knowledge. The Piri Reis map is what we might call a ghost in the machine of history. The official historical narrative is a machine that runs on a linear, progressive timeline, from primitive hunter-gatherers to agricultural societies, to early city-states, and finally to our modern technological age. It is a story of steady, upward progress. The Piri Reis map and other out-of-place artifacts, arts, like the Antikythera mechanism, violently disrupt this machine. They suggest a different model of history, a cyclical one, with forgotten peaks of high civilization followed by cataclysmic dark ages that wipe the slate clean. What if Hapgood was right? What if there was a global maritime culture that predated the Egyptians and Sumerians? A culture that was destroyed by the cataclysm that ended the last ice age, around 11,600 years ago, an event known as the Younger Dryas, which saw catastrophic sea level rise and climate disruption. Such a civilization would have had its coastal cities and knowledge centers drowned, its maps and records scattered. The Piri Reis map could be one of the last surviving fragments, a third-hand copy of a copy, passed down through generations of sailors and scribes, its true meaning lost to time. This theory connects directly to Plato's tale of Atlantis. In his dialogues Timaeus and Critias, Plato describes a mighty naval power, located beyond the Pillars of Hercules, that was destroyed by earthquakes and floods in a single day and night. For centuries, this has been dismissed as a philosophical fable. But what if it was a distorted memory of a real historical event, the destruction of Hapgood's proposed maritime civilization? The Piri Reis map forces us to ask a deeply uncomfortable question. Is our civilization the first to achieve global reach and advanced technology? Or are we merely the latest in a long line, an arrogant culture suffering from a profound case of planetary amnesia? The map is a challenge to our civilizational hubris. It suggests that we are not the pinnacle of history, but perhaps just the survivors, rediscovering knowledge that was once commonplace. As the age of sail and sextants gave way to the 20th century's engine of industry and total war, the nature of mystery changed. The world was shrinking. The blank spaces on the map were being filled in, one by one. But the human need for an unknown, for a frontier where our greatest hopes and darkest fears could play out, did not disappear. It simply migrated. It moved from the realm of geography to the realm of ideology, paranoia, and secrecy. And the last truly blank space on Earth, Antarctica, became the physical anchor point for this new kind of mythos. The continent transformed into a perfect screen onto which the 20th century would project its most terrifying demons. The Black Sun on ice, Germany's Antarctic obsession. The story begins, as so many dark stories of the 20th century do, with Nazi Germany. In 1938, on the eve of the war that would set the world on fire, the Third Reich launched a top-secret expedition to the ice. On the surface, the mission of the MS Schwabenland was utterly pragmatic. Germany was preparing for a war of autarky, of total self-sufficiency, and they needed to secure their own supply of whale oil, a critical component for everything from industrial lubricants to the margarine people spread on their toast. But to understand the Nazis is to understand that the pragmatic was always fused with the pathological. This was never just about whale oil. The Nazi high command, particularly figures like Heinrich Himmler and Rudolf Hess, were deeply enmeshed in a bizarre shadow world of occultism. Societies like the Thule Society were not just esoteric fraternities. They were foundational to the Nazi ideology. They preached a doctrine of a lost Aryan homeland, a place called Hyperborea or Thule, which they believed was located in the polar north. They sought a mythical energy called Vril and believed in hidden masters, superior beings who resided inside a hollow earth. For these true believers, the polar regions were not just geography, they were sacred geography. They were the source of their racial power and the potential hiding place of ancient, world-altering technology. So when the Schwabenland expedition dropped its swastika-emblazoned darts onto the ice, claiming a vast territory they named New Schwabenland, they weren't just claiming a piece of land. They were planting their flag on a piece of their own mythology. Then the war came and went. And in the silence that followed Germany's defeat, a new story began to be whispered. It was a story born in the backrooms of intelligence agencies and the pages of sensationalist papers. It claimed the 1938 expedition was a cover for the construction of a massive, clandestine base, Base 211, a final, impregnable fortress for the Nazi elite, hidden in a network of ice caves warmed by volcanic vents. The mysterious surrender of German U-boats in Argentina months after the war fueled the fire. Had they been the final ferry, delivering the last remnants of the Reich, its leaders, its scientists, its secrets, to their new home at the bottom of the world? From a philosophical standpoint, the myth of the Antarctic Nazi base is fascinating. It's not really a story about history, it's a story about the nature of evil. We find it impossible to accept that an evil as absolute and as technologically advanced as the Third Reich could be completely extinguished. It's easier, more comforting in a strange way, to imagine that it wasn't destroyed, but merely retreated. To give it a physical location, a Bond villain-style lair carved from ice, is to contain it. It allows us to sleep at night, believing the monster has been chained up in a remote basement, rather than confronting the terrifying truth that the monster is a potential that lives within human society itself, always waiting for a chance to re-emerge. The Nazi base isn't a place. It's a psychological container for a fear we haven't yet learned how to face. The Eagle and the Abyss, America's armed response. If the Nazis wrote the first chapter of this modern myth, the United States wrote the second, and they wrote it with the full force of the American military. In 1946, just a year after the war's end, the U.S. launched Operation Highjump. This was no simple scientific survey. It was an invasion force, led by the celebrated polar explorer Admiral Richard E. By it comprised an aircraft carrier, 13 other warships, dozens of aircraft, and nearly 5,000 men. The official story was that this was a training exercise, a mission to test men and equipment in extreme cold and map the continent. But the question that hung in the air then and still hangs there today is, who launches an invasion against a continent of penguins? The sheer scale of Highjump and its incredible urgency screamed of a different motive. Many believe its true, classified objective was to root out and destroy the Nazi presence in Neuschwabenland. The mission, planned for 6 months, was cut short after just 8 weeks. The fleet limped home, having suffered casualties and the loss of multiple aircraft. The withdrawal was abrupt, and the official explanations were vague. Into this vacuum of information flooded speculation, which coalesced around the figure of Admiral Byatt himself. This is where history dissolves completely into legend, into a piece of pure American folklore that speaks volumes about the anxieties of the new atomic age. A document began to circulate, a purported secret diary of Admiral Byatt. The diary tells an incredible story. On a reconnaissance flight over the pole, Byatt's plane is supposedly intercepted by strange, saucer-shaped aircraft. His controls are taken from him, and he is guided into a lush, green valley hidden within the ice. He lands and is met by emissaries of a highly advanced civilization who live in a subterranean city called Agartha. He is taken before their leader, the Master, who delivers a grave message for the surface world. Humanity's recent discovery and use of atomic weapons has them on a path to self-destruction, and the guardians of this inner world are deeply concerned. The diary has been thoroughly debunked as a later forgery, but that almost doesn't matter. The story's power is not in its authenticity, but in its symbolism. Think about the timing. 1947, the year Highjump ended, is the year the modern UFO phenomenon was born. It's the year of the Kenneth Arnold sighting, the year of the alleged Roswell crash. It's the year the Cold War began to crystallize. The Byatt/Agartha story is the nexus point where all these streams of paranoia meet. It ties the lingering fear of Nazi superbombers to the new fear of alien invaders and the omnipresent terror of nuclear war. From a psychological perspective, the Agartha myth is a fascinating coping mechanism. In a world suddenly living under the threat of instant annihilation, it provides a kind of cosmic safety net. It imagines a wise, benevolent, almost parental race watching over us, ready to intervene before we destroy ourselves. It's a deeply spiritual cry for help, disguised as a military conspiracy theory. It reflects a desperate longing for a higher power to save us from ourselves, a theme that echoes the ancient belief in Shambhala or the Celtic belief in a magical underworld. In the end, the myths of Neuschwabenland and Operation Highjump tell us very little about what is actually in Antarctica. But they tell us everything about the demons that haunted the 20th century. We didn't discover monsters on the ice. We brought our own with us. Antarctica became the last empty spot on the globe where we could build a stage and act out our unresolved traumas, our fear of vanquished ideologies, our terror of our own destructive technology, and our desperate hope that someone or something is out there to save us. The ice became a mirror, and in it, we saw only our own reflections. For all the ink spilled on human conspiracies, on Nazis and secret missions, the truly profound secrets of Antarctica may have nothing to do with us at all. The human drama is a recent and noisy distraction. The real story, the one that should make the hair on your arm stand up, is far older, far stranger, and is written in a language that is not human. It's the story of a hidden biology, an alien world that has thrived in isolation for millions of years, right here on our own planet. To find the true other, we don't need to build a starship. We just need to learn how to drill. The liquid archives, a library of life beneath the ice. For most of history, we saw Antarctica as a continent of two things: rock and ice, a sterile, dead expanse. We could not have been more wrong. We now know that beneath that frozen shield lies a sprawling, continent-wide network of more than 400 subglacial lakes. These are not small ponds. The largest, Lake Vostok, is one of the biggest lakes on the planet, the size of Lake Ontario, and it has been hermetically sealed from the outside world for at least 15 million years, buried under 2.5 miles of crushing ice. Think about what that means. These lakes are, in essence, pristine time capsules. They are liquid archives of a prehistoric Earth. When Russian scientists, after decades of painstaking effort, finally breached the surface of Lake Vostok in 2012, it was an event on par with opening a pharaoh's tomb for the first time. The same sense of breathless anticipation, the same risk of contaminating a perfectly preserved environment, the same potential to find something that would rewrite everything. And what we have found in these lakes, both Vostok and others like it, is the scientific equivalent of finding a living, breathing dinosaur. We have found life. Not just any life, but a form of life that laughs at every rule we ever wrote. These are the extremophiles, organisms that thrive in eternal darkness, under pressures that would crush a submarine, in water with no oxygen, completely cut off from the sun's energy that powers all life on the surface. They survive by performing a kind of slow, cold alchemy, metabolizing minerals from the bedrock, breathing sulfates and iron instead of oxygen. This discovery is a philosophical earthquake. Our entire biological worldview has been built on the foundation of the sun. Photosynthesis was God. But the life in these lakes proves that our law of biology was merely a local ordinance. Life doesn't need the sun. It just needs an energy gradient. It can be powered by the faint geothermal heat of the planet's core, by a deep, subterranean metabolism we never knew existed. This changes everything. It means the search for extraterrestrial life on icy moons like Jupiter's Europa is no longer a speculative fantasy. Antarctica is the dress rehearsal. It's the proof of concept that life can and does find a way in the cold, dark, high-pressure oceans of the outer solar system. We are learning that the universe is likely teeming with these hidden biospheres, and the first alien we ever truly understood may be the one we found buried under our own feet. Blood falls. The planet's beating heart laid bare. If the subglacial lakes are the mind-bending secret, then blood falls is the gut punch. In the desolate, bone-dry McMurdo valleys, there is a glacier, the Taylor Glacier, that appears to be bleeding. A 5-story waterfall of what looks for all the world like dark, red blood pours from a fissure in the ice, staining the pristine white face of the glacier like a gruesome, open wound. It's a surreal, shocking, and deeply unsettling sight. The scientific explanation is almost as strange as the site itself. The blood is the outflow of an ancient, trapped body of water that has no oxygen and is fantastically rich in dissolved iron. For millions of years, this water has been stewing in the dark, and when it finally finds a crack and hits the oxygen in our atmosphere for the first time, the iron instantly rusts, turning the water a deep crimson. But within that brine is its own unique ecosystem of microbes, living fossils that are metabolizing that very iron to survive. To a philosopher or a mystic, this is something more than a chemical reaction. This is the planet showing us its own circulatory system. It's a wound that reveals a deep, hidden, planetary-scale metabolism. This is a visceral confirmation of the Gaia hypothesis, the idea that the Earth is not a dead ball of rock with a thin smear of life on its surface, but is itself a single, complex, living organism. We're seeing the planet's own lifeblood, the evidence of a deep, slow biology that operates on a timescale so vast it's nearly incomprehensible to our frantic, short-lived consciousness. The glacier isn't bleeding out. It's revealing its own inner life. The faces in the abyss, monsters of the modern mind. No sacred or forbidden place in human mythology is complete without its guardians, its monsters at the threshold. And as our technology has begun to probe the Antarctic abyss, our collective unconscious has begun to populate it with new ones. The most prominent is the Ninja, a creature born from alleged sightings by Japanese research vessels. It's described as a massive, whale-sized being, but eerily humanoid in its form, pale white, with arms, legs, and even a face. It rises from the black, frigid depths, a silent, ghostly apparition before sinking back into the void. Then there's the enduring myth of the Kraken, given new life by satellite photos that seem to show a colossal tentacled beast churning the waters near Deception Island. It was, of course, just a rock formation, but the story took hold because the idea of it felt true. These creatures are not zoological curiosities, they are psychological projections. They are the 21st century equivalent of the dragons and sea serpents that medieval cartographers would draw on the edges of their maps. In the space, labeled Hic sunt dracons, here be dragons. They are archetypes, rising from the deep waters of the human psyche to mark the boundary between the known and the terrifyingly unknown. In ancient lore, a guardian of the threshold is a monstrous figure that protects a sacred space from the unworthy. The Ninja and the Kraken are the psychic guardians of Antarctica's deepest secrets. Their disturbing, semi-human forms reflect our own deep-seated fear of what we might become, or what we might find, if we trespass too far into a realm that was not meant for us. They are the immune system of the planet's subconscious, manifesting in our stories to warn us that we are approaching a place of immense power, a place where the rules of our world no longer apply. They are the faces staring back at us from the abyss, and they look disturbingly like our own. In the final analysis, we arrive at the most tangible and perhaps the most consequential mystery of all, the political status of Antarctica. The continent is a ghost on the world stage, a place without a government, a flag, or a native population. It is ruled by a single, extraordinary document, an agreement that is either the most enlightened treaty ever signed, or the most sophisticated cover-up in human history. To understand the future of Antarctica, we must first dissect this impossible agreement and the velvet cage it has built around the bottom of the world. The impossible treaty, a pact of peace or a pact of silence. On December 1st, 1959, at the absolute height of the Cold War, the world's superpowers did something that, by all logic, should have been impossible. The United States and the Soviet Union, two empires locked in a struggle for the planet's soul and pointing nuclear arsenals at each other, sat down with 10 other nations and signed the Antarctic Treaty. This document declared the entire continent a sanctuary for science, banned all military activity, and, most critically, froze all territorial claims. In an instant, Antarctica became the first and only post-national space on Earth, a commons for all humanity. This treaty was so radical, so unprecedented. It became the direct blueprint for the Outer Space Treaty of 1967, which governs the Moon and all celestial bodies. From an idealistic perspective, this was humanity's finest hour, a moment of true enlightenment where the pursuit of knowledge triumphed over tribal conflict. But a political realist, or a student of human nature, has to ask a harder question. Why would these ruthless, competing empires so readily relinquish control over a continent whose strategic and resource potential was immense? This question is the engine of the entire Forbidden Continent theory. The suspicious interpretation is that the treaty wasn't born of idealism, but of fear. The theory states that something was discovered during the post-war period, perhaps by Biot's Operation Highjump, perhaps by the Soviets, that was so far beyond our conventional understanding and so potentially dangerous that the rival powers had no choice but to form a pact of mutual silence. A non-aggression pact not against each other, but against it. In this view, the treaty isn't a peace agreement. It's a quarantine. It's a global gag order designed to manage a truth so disruptive it could shatter our civilization. The reality is likely a messy combination of both. A moment of genuine scientific optimism, mixed with a healthy dose of cold, hard realism. Neither the US nor the Soviets could be sure of dominating the continent, so they agreed to a stalemate, effectively locking the door until a time when one of them might find the key. The velvet rope, how to forbid a continent. This brings us to the nature of the continent's forbidden status today. There are no walls, no minefields, no fences around Antarctica. Its control is more subtle and far more effective. The continent is forbidden by a velvet rope of immense cost and crushing logistics. To even set foot on the interior requires the backing of a national government program, millions of dollars, and passing through a bureaucratic labyrinth of permits and environmental protocols. This creates an exclusive club. The continent isn't so much locked down as it is managed to ensure that only the powerful, only the nations who are party to the treaty, can operate there in any meaningful way. This, of course, only fuels the suspicion. The very mechanisms designed to protect the fragile environment are seen by many as the perfect tools for protecting a fragile secret. It ensures that whatever happens in Antarctica stays in Antarctica. The Great Thaw, a cold rush in a warming world. For over 60 years, this fragile peace has held. But now, the treaty and the silence it guards are being threatened not by a political rival, but by the planet itself. The engine of climate change is doing what no army ever could. It's dismantling the fortress. The Antarctic Peninsula is one of the fastest warming places on Earth. The ice is melting, and as the ice recedes, the forbidden is becoming accessible. We are now in the opening stages of a 21st century cold rush. A new great game is being played on the ice, but it's a shadow war fought with science labs and icebreakers instead of cavalry. Nations like China and Russia are aggressively expanding their footprint, building massive, state-of-the-art research stations that are conveniently located in areas of strategic interest and potential resource wealth. These bases are dual-use facilities. They are listening posts, satellite ground stations, and critical placeholders for the day the treaty might fracture. The scramble for the Arctic, with its new shipping lanes and oil fields, was the dress rehearsal. Antarctica is the main event. This is the ultimate test of the tragedy of the commons. For 6 decades, a shared fear kept the peace. But as the ice melts and the unimaginable wealth of the continent, its minerals, its oil, its freshwater, is slowly unveiled, will our shared interest in preservation be overwhelmed by the primal, nationalistic lust for resources? History's answer to that question is not encouraging. The prophecy of a green continent, the final act. This leads us to the final, mind-bending possibility, the greening of Antarctica. What was once science fiction is now a subject of serious scientific modeling. By the end of this century, parts of the Antarctic coast may be temperate enough to support plant life, perhaps even limited agriculture. The ancient world, the world of the fossil forests and the Piri Reis map, is literally re-emerging from its tomb of ice. This is more than a climate event, it's a mythological one, the return of a lost land. And it poses the ultimate question to our civilization. What will we do when it returns? Will we treat this new, green world as a sacred trust, a second chance to get things right? Or will we see it as the last piece of unclaimed real estate on the planet, the final prize to be fought over? The future of Antarctica is the final test of our species' character. The continent has served as a mirror for our past and present. It reflected our 20th century fear of rogue ideologies. It now reflects our 21st century anxieties about great power conflict and ecological collapse. Its future will be a verdict on our maturity. Are we capable of foresight and stewardship, or are we trapped in an endless cycle of consumption and conflict? The melting ice is like a vault door, slowly grinding open. We have no idea what truly lies behind it. The ruins of a world that was, the seeds of a world that could be, or just a new, empty battlefield for the same old human failings. But the door is opening. And the one thing that feels certain is that we, in our current state of division and distraction, are not ready for what is about to be revealed. We began this journey by asking what lies beneath the ice of Antarctica. We have explored theories of lost pyramids, ancient maps, Nazi bases, and alien life. We have weighed the scientific explanations against the pull of mythology and conspiracy. And in the end, we find that the greatest secret of Antarctica may not be what is hidden there, but what the continent reveals about us. Antarctica is a mirror. When we look at its pyramid-shaped mountains, we see a reflection of our own longing for a grander, more meaningful past, a past populated by builders of impossible megaliths. When we study the Piri Reis map, we see a reflection of our anxiety about the fragility of knowledge, the fear that our own civilization could one day be forgotten, its achievements reduced to a handful of baffling artifacts. When we tell stories of secret Nazi bases and encounters with flying saucers, we are projecting our modern political traumas and technological fears onto the last empty space on the map. And as we watch the ice melt, we are confronted with the most terrifying reflection of all, the consequences of our own actions. The future of Antarctica is inextricably bound to the future of our planet. Its fate is our fate. Perhaps the truth is a synthesis of all these ideas. Perhaps there is no single, monolithic secret to be found. Perhaps Antarctica is a land of multiple truths, a place of genuine scientific wonder and extreme life, a stage for geopolitical maneuvering, and a canvas for our collective imagination. The forbidden continent remains forbidden not necessarily because of a global conspiracy, but because it guards a threshold. To fully explore it would be to confront the deepest questions of our planet's history, the limits of life, and the precariousness of our own existence. Until we are ready to face those questions, the ice will hold its secrets. Antarctica will remain the last great unknown, a land of silence, of science, and of suspicion, waiting at the bottom of the world.